A desperate mother, with only $1 in her hand and 2 children shivering from cold and hunger, enters a grocery store in Minneapolis. Unsure how she will feed her children that night, she closes her eyes and says one last prayer. And on the other side of the store, a man feels an impulse impossible to ignore. What seemed like just a chance encounter was, in fact, a miracle being plotted from the beginning. And what happens after that goes far beyond food and shelter. A friendship is born, faith is reborn. And when you discover where this story leads, you will understand that God is never late. He only waits for the perfect moment. Prepare your heart, because this story of redemption, faith, and love will move you from beginning to end. So subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment on where you're watching from, and let's get to the story. Sarah stood in the doorway of that small grocery store, the kind you find on any corner in Minneapolis, with its flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee in the air. She was 32, but at that moment she seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime on her shoulders. Her brown hair was tied in a loose ponytail. Her thin coat offered little protection against the biting November wind. And her eyes, her eyes told a story that no words could translate. It was the look of someone who had fought, and was now on her last breath. On the right, clinging to the hem of her coat, was 5-year-old Emma, her cheeks flushed with cold and her eyes wide, looking at her mother as if she were the only certainty in the world. On the other side, 3-year-old Lucas whimpered softly, rubbing his eyes with his icy little hands. The children didn't quite understand what was happening, but they felt it. Children always feel. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the crumpled dollar in her pocket. $1. It was literally all she had in the world at that moment. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't an exaggeration. It was the stark reality. 3 weeks ago, she had lost her job at the laundromat where she had worked for years. The owner simply closed the doors overnight, without warning, without anything. And as if that weren't enough, the rent on the tiny apartment where they lived was already 2 months overdue. The landlord had given an ultimatum, either pay by the end of the week, or they were out on the street. But the worst had happened 6 months earlier. Michael, her husband, had died in a car accident on his way home from work. Suddenly, without warning, without time to say goodbye, Sarah still remembered the policeman knocking on the door that rainy night, and how the whole world seemed to collapse in slow motion. Michael was the foundation. He was the one who held things together when everything crumbled, and now he was no longer there. Since then, Sarah had tried everything. She sent out resumes, did odd jobs, asked acquaintances for help. But Minneapolis is a big, cold city, not just in terms of weather. People walk past you on the street and don't even see you, and when you're falling, it feels like you're falling all by yourself. On that gray afternoon, with the temperature nearing freezing and the sky heavy with clouds, Sarah felt she had hit rock bottom. She had left home that morning with the last bill she had left, $5. She used $4 to pay for the bus and buy a stale loaf of bread for the children's breakfast. $1 remained. And now, looking inside that grocery store, she had to decide, what could she buy with $1 that could at least feed the children for the night? She closed her eyes right there in the doorway, the cold wind hitting her face. Emma pulled her coat back up. "Mom, are we going to eat today?" Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a smile. "Yes, my love, she will. Mommy will figure something out." But inside, she was breaking down. She was exhausted. She was lost. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah did something she hadn't done since Michael's funeral. She prayed. It wasn't one of those beautiful church-style prayers with fancy words. It was a raw, desperate prayer, whispered right there in the cold of the street. "God, if you're still there, if you still see me, please, show me a way. I can't take it anymore. I don't know what to do anymore. Just help me. For my children's sake, help me." She opened her eyes, took a deep breath, and entered the grocery store, holding Emma and Lucas's hands tightly. The store was almost empty. Only the cashier, fiddling with his cell phone, and 2 or 3 other customers scattered throughout the aisles. Sarah walked slowly between the shelves, looking at the prices, calculating mentally. A packet of instant noodles, 99 cents. That would do. At least the children would eat something hot. She picked up the package, her hand trembling, not just from the cold, but from humiliation. How had she reached this point? How could a woman who had always worked, always fought, always done the right thing, be there buying a measly packet of instant noodles with her last dollar? Tears began to burn in her eyes, but Sarah blinked quickly, pushing them away. No, not in front of the children. She needed to be strong. She had always been strong. She had to continue being so. That's when he appeared. On the other side of the store, leaning against the bread section, stood a tall man in his early 40s, wearing a gray wool hat and a thick winter coat. Gray hair at the temples, unshaven, a serious but gentle expression. He was observing, not in a strange way, but in an attentive way, as if he were waiting for something, as if something inside him had triggered an alert. His name was David Harris. He worked as a manager for a logistics company, had been married for 20 years, and had 3 grown children. He had gone to the grocery store just to buy milk and bread before returning home. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another ordinary afternoon. But when he saw that thin woman, with 2 small children clinging to her, holding a package of pasta with a trembling hand, something inside him stirred. It wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity. It was something bigger, something he couldn't explain, but knew well. It was that inner voice, that gentle nudge in his heart that he had learned to recognize over the years. The voice of God. Go there. Help her. David hesitated for a second. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know her story. And he knew that people could react badly. Some people get offended when you offer help. They think it's humiliating. But the impulse was too strong. It was impossible to ignore. He dropped the shopping basket he was holding and walked over to Sarah, who was standing in the aisle, still clutching that package of pasta, with the children clinging to her. "Excuse me." David's voice came out low and gentle. Sarah looked up, startled. For a second, she thought he was store security, believing she was stealing or something. But when she saw his face, his calm expression, his sincere gaze, she relaxed a little. "Yes," she replied, her voice hoarse. David took a step closer but maintained a respectful distance. "Sorry to bother you, but I saw you there with the kids and, I don't know, I felt I should ask. Is everything all right? Is there anything I can help you with?" Sarah blinked, confused. Was this real? A complete stranger offering help like that? Out of the blue? She looked around, thinking maybe it was some kind of prank, or that he wanted to sell her something. But no, he was just there, waiting, with that genuine look in his eyes. I'm fine, thank you." She lied automatically, the way we always lie when we don't want to admit we're broken inside. David smiled slightly, but he didn't leave. "Well, look, I don't want to be intrusive, okay? But I'm realizing that maybe things aren't going so well. And if you'll let me, I'd like to help. Really." Sarah felt her jaw tremble. No one had offered her help in months. No one had asked if she was all right. And now this man, this complete stranger, was standing there in front of her, with a look so full of compassion that she couldn't hold back. Tears began to stream silently down her face. Her voice trailed off. "I only have $1. That's all I have. And I don't know how I'm going to feed my children after today." Emma, realizing her mother was crying, tightened her grip on her coat and began to cry as well. Lucas, on the other side, looked confused, torn between his mother and the unknown man. David felt his heart clench. He didn't know the whole story yet, but he knew enough. That woman was at her breaking point, and he was there because God had put him there. There was no other explanation. "That's fine," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Today you don't need to worry about that. I'll take care of it. Come on, follow me." Sarah froze for a second, unsure whether to trust him, unsure if it was real, or if she was delirious from exhaustion. But something in David's gaze was solid. It was reassuring. and she no longer had the energy to doubt. So, with the children still clinging to her, she followed the man to the food aisle. David wasted no time. He began grabbing things from the shelves with the ease of someone who shops every day. Rice, beans, frozen chicken, milk, eggs, bread, butter, fruit, juice, even cookies and chocolate for the children. Sarah just watched, speechless, tears still streaming down her face. Emma and Lucas stared wide-eyed, not quite understanding, but sensing that something special was happening. "Do you like chocolate?" David asked, looking at the two little ones with a smile on his face. Emma nodded slowly, still shy. Lucas simply held his mother's hand tighter. "Then let's get chocolate," David said, grabbing 2 large bars and putting them in the cart. Then he looked at Sarah. "Anything the kids especially like? Any food you know how to make well?" Sarah could barely speak. Her throat was constricted with emotion. They like spaghetti," she managed to whisper. "So let's bring spaghetti, and sauce and cheese." The whole feast. When they got to the checkout, the bag was already full. David swiped his card without hesitation. $143. Sarah saw the amount on the screen and felt her legs go weak. That was more than she had earned in her last week of work before being fired. The clerk, a young man with headphones around his neck, packed everything and handed over the bags. David picked up the heaviest one and looked at Sarah. "Where is your house? Is it far from here?" Sarah shook her head, still dazed. "No. It's about 3 blocks, but I don't know how to thank you. I don't." "No need to thank me yet," David said with a calm smile. "Let's take this to your house first. It's too cold to be carrying heavy things outside." And so, the 4 left the grocery store together, David in front with the bags, Sarah behind holding Emma and Lucas's hands, who now walked with a little more energy, knowing they would have hot food at home. The snow had begun to fall lightly, covering the sidewalks of Minneapolis with that silent white that only winter brings. Along the way, David asked, gently, without pressuring, but genuinely interested, and Sarah, perhaps because she was too exhausted to keep it all inside, perhaps because she felt she could confide in him, began to tell him. She talked about Michael, about the accident, about the job she lost, about the overdue rent, about the sleepless nights, crying silently in the bathroom so as not to wake the children, about the feeling of sinking and having no one to pull her up. David listened silently, only shaking his head occasionally, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. When she finished, he took a deep breath. "You know, Sarah, I don't think it was a coincidence that I was in that grocery store today. I was going to walk right past it and go to another store closer to home. But something made me stop there, and now, hearing your story, I'm sure of it. God put me there because you needed me, and I'm honored to be able to help." Sarah looked at him, her eyes welling up with tears again. You believe it was God?" "I know it was," David replied, with the calm conviction of someone who has seen God act before. "I've learned over the years that when He puts something in your heart with that kind of force, you don't question it, you just obey. And today, He told me to help you. So that's what I'm going to do." They arrived at an old building with peeling paint and rusty stairs. Sarah went up to the 2nd floor, opened the door to a tiny apartment, a room that served as both bedroom and living room, a cramped kitchen, a bathroom the size of a closet, but it was clean, it was organized. You could see that, even with nothing, Sarah was doing her best to make that place a home. David placed the bags on the kitchen table and turned to her. "You said the rent is overdue. How much is left?" Sarah's eyes widened. No, you've already done too much. I can't accept any more, seriously." "Sarah, how much longer?" She hesitated, but his voice was firm, not authoritarian, but firm. 2 months, $800 in total, she whispered, embarrassed. David took his wallet out of his pocket, pulled out his checkbook and began to write. Sarah tried to stop him, but he raised his hand, asking for silence. When he finished, he pulled out the check and handed it to her, $1,000. $800 for rent, $200 for you to have as a reserve, so you don't go through hardship again so soon. Sarah looked at the check, then at his face, then at the check again. She began to sob, in that way that people cry when they can't hold it in anymore. David stepped forward and, with the silent permission that only compassion gives, placed his hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Sarah, and you don't have to carry everything on your shoulders. Sometimes, God sends people to help, and today, I am that person." The children, who were sitting on the floor playing with the shopping bags, looked at the scene without fully understanding, but sensing that something big and beautiful was happening. David stayed a little longer. He helped put away the groceries, chatted with Emma and Lucas, and made them laugh for the first time that day. Before leaving, he wrote his number on a piece of paper. "Call me if you need anything, okay? And tomorrow, I'll take you to meet some people from my church. It doesn't have to be anything too religious, just good people who can help too, okay?" Sarah nodded, still speechless. When the door closed behind David, she sat on the kitchen floor and cried like she hadn't cried in months. But this time, it wasn't just pain. It was relief. It was gratitude. It was hope breathing again within her. That night, Sarah made spaghetti. The children ate until they couldn't eat anymore, sauce dripping down their chins and smiles from ear to ear. After dinner, she put them both to bed, covered them with the old but warm blanket, and watched them sleep. Emma had started smiling again. Lucas had stopped whining. And Sarah had begun to feel again that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right in the end. The next day, David showed up early in the morning, as promised. He took Sarah and the children to First Community Church, a medium-sized church in downtown Minneapolis, with those red brick walls and colorful stained glass windows that reflected the sunlight. The place smelled of fresh coffee and children's laughter. There was a group of volunteers preparing donations for families in need. David introduced Sarah to Pastor Jerome, a black man in his 60s, with a broad smile and a tight hug. He also introduced her to Margaret, the coordinator of the church's social services group, a white-haired lady with a motherly gaze who immediately took Emma and Lucas by the hand and led them to play with the other children, while she chatted with Sarah. "Honey, you don't have to go through this alone," Margaret said, holding Sarah's hands firmly. "We're here precisely for that. We'll help you find a job, we'll support you with the children, and most importantly, we'll give you what you need most right now, a family." And that's exactly what happened. In the following weeks, Sarah's life began to change. Margaret got her a job at a coffee shop near the church, with flexible hours that allowed her to pick up the children from school. The church paid the rent for the next 3 months, until she got settled. Volunteers took turns looking after Emma and Lucas when Sarah needed to work later. And David kept showing up every week just to see how they were doing, bring pizza on the weekend, or help with Emma's homework. But what mattered most wasn't the money or the food or the job. It was what Sarah began to recover: her dignity, her hope, her faith. 6 months had passed. Minneapolis was now in the middle of spring, with the trees in bloom and the sun finally warming the once icy streets. Sarah was different. Her face had regained its color, her eyes sparkled again, her smile was genuine. She had gotten a raise at the coffee shop, paid off all her debts, and even started a small savings account. Emma was in school, getting good grades and making friends. Lucas had stopped having nightmares. Life was finally getting back on track. But what had changed most was something no one could see from the outside: Sarah's heart. She had started to believe again, not in a forced way, not because someone told her to, but because she had seen God act. She had seen him send a man to a grocery store on a gray day when she was at rock bottom. And that encounter had changed everything. David remained a constant presence. He and his wife, Carol, had practically adopted Sarah and the children as part of the family. Sunday dinners at their house, walks in the park, birthday parties. Emma called David Uncle David. Lucas would chase after him every time he showed up. And Sarah had found something she thought she had lost forever: a true friend. One Saturday afternoon, they were all sitting in David's backyard having a barbecue. The children were playing in the inflatable pool. Carol was preparing salad in the kitchen, and Sarah and David were sitting in the garden chairs, chatting quietly. "You know, David, I still can't believe all this happened, Sarah said, looking at the blue sky. 6 months ago, I literally had nothing. No hope, no way out. And today I have everything again. David smiled, taking a sip of lemonade. It wasn't luck, Sarah. It was God. From beginning to end. Sarah nodded, her eyes shining. I know. And you know what impresses me most? It wasn't just the food, or the money, or the job. It was you showing up that day. It was you obeying that impulse in your heart. Because if you had ignored it, if you had walked right past, I don't know what would have happened to me. David was silent for a moment, then sighed deeply. Look, Sarah, I'm going to tell you something I've never told many people. About 10 years ago, I was in a situation similar to yours. Not as serious, but bad. My business had failed. I was up to my neck in debt. My family almost fell apart. And one day, in a moment of desperation, a stranger helped me. Out of nowhere. For no apparent reason, he paid a bill I couldn't pay, gave me advice, introduced me to people who opened doors for me. And when I asked him why he was doing that, do you know what he said? Sarah shook her head, curious. He said, because someone did this for me one day, and I promised that whenever God put someone in my path, I would do the same. And that's what changed my life. It wasn't just the help itself, but understanding that God works through people, and that I could be that person for someone else too. Sarah felt the tears welling up again, but now they were good tears, gentle tears of gratitude. And you were that person for me, she said, her voice breaking. And you're going to be that person for someone else too, David replied, smiling. Because that's how it works. We receive, we give, we are blessed, we bless. It's a cycle. And you, Sarah, have a powerful story, a story that will inspire many people. Sarah thought about it for a long moment. She looked at the children playing, at Carol inside humming as she cooked, at the clear blue sky above her. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of the future. She felt purpose. A few months later, something unexpected happened. Sarah was working at the coffee shop when a woman walked in, looking lost, with a small child in her arms. The woman had that look Sarah knew so well. The look of someone at their breaking point, someone who doesn't know what to do anymore. Sarah watched for a moment, and then she felt it. That same impulse David had felt that day at the grocery store. That gentle nudge in her heart. She approached the woman, smiled, and asked, "Can I help you with anything?" The woman hesitated, but then began to cry. And Sarah, with all the patience and compassion in the world, listened. She discovered that the woman had just lost her job, that her husband had abandoned her and their daughter, that she had nowhere to go. And without thinking twice, Sarah did exactly what David had done for her. She offered help. She paid for the woman's meal, gave her the church's number, called Margaret, and explained the situation. And that afternoon, another life began to be rebuilt. When Sarah told David what had happened, he simply smiled, with that quiet pride of someone who sees a cycle completed. "See, I told you. You're the next link in the chain." Sarah smiled back, feeling her heart warm, "And I will carry this with me for the rest of my life. Because I know, David, I know that God never abandoned me. He was just waiting for the right moment, and He used you to show me that." Today, more than a year after that gray day in Minneapolis, Sarah continues working at the coffee shop. Emma is 6 years old, reading books on her own and dreaming of becoming a teacher. Lucas is 4, talkative and full of energy. And Sarah is a different person. She has regained her faith. She has regained her smile. She has regained her dreams. She attends church regularly, is part of a support group that helps other families in need, and every time she tells her story, she makes a point of saying one thing: God is never late. He doesn't forget about you. He just waits for the perfect moment. And when that moment arrives, He sends an angel, sometimes disguised as a stranger in a grocery store, sometimes disguised as a friend, but He always sends one. David and Sarah became best friends. He remains a constant presence in her life and the children's, Not because he needs to be, but because it has become a real family. And whenever Sarah looks back to the day she had only $1 in her hand and no hope in her heart, she remembers the desperate prayer she made at the door of the grocery store, and she remembers that God answered, in His way, in His time. But He answered, because in the end we're never alone. Even when it seems like the whole world has turned its back on us, God is there, working behind the scenes, preparing the miracle. And when the time comes, He puts the right people in the right place, because that's how He works, through us, through obedient hearts, through people who decide to listen to that impulse and do good, without expecting anything in return. And this is the most beautiful story of all. You know, this story really resonates with me, because it shows that God never abandons us even when everything seems lost. He just waits for the perfect moment to send a miracle, and that miracle always comes through obedient hearts. Sarah found hope when she had nothing left. David found purpose by listening to that inner voice, and today, they both continue spreading this current of love and faith. If this story touched your heart, leave a like, comment on what you thought, and subscribe to keep hearing stories like this, because we need to remember, we are never alone. I'll leave a video here that I guarantee you'll also like,